This video is brought to you by John Robson Guitar Tuition. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by enrolling on a course, purchasing some guitar lessons or a t-shirt, or you can join my Patreon. Now, on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. It's Tuesday today, which means we're doing a top 5 list. And this is going to be the first in what's probably going to be a bunch of videos on similar kind of topics. A few years ago, I was watching a show on the BBC, and I saw it again recently. It was called When Albums Ruled the World, and it was like a sort of a panel kind of discussion type show where various celebrities, I think Jeremy Clarkson was amongst them, were discussing their favourite albums. And the point that was made, I think, by Danny Baker on that show was that the 70s was a massively prolific, perhaps the most prolific period of rock music. Because if you think about it, rock music kind of got going in the 60s, Hendrix, Cream, Zeppelin were kind of getting started then, I guess. But the 70s was when rock as a genre flourished. You had the birth of heavy metal, really, with, some people will probably dispute this, but I think, you can really trace it back to Black Sabbath, their first album. That's when you started getting the thing, the music that was all about that sort of tritone riffing and all that sort of stuff. But, so, you had the birth of metal, you had, kind of heavy rock or hard rock, you had the whole kind of quaint English, quintessentially English kind of folk rock, with Pentangle and Fairport Convention, and I guess Jethro Tull came out of that as well. You had the sort of American version of that, which I guess would be like the sort of country rock with the Eagles and bands of that, the singer-songwriter kind of rock sort of thing, Bob Seger, Bruce Springsteen, all of these different, and then punk, and then, I guess towards the end of the decade, the sort of whole new wave of British heavy metal. Lots and lots of different, kind of flavours of rock music came out in the 70s, and I think there's a strong case to say that does make that decade something a little bit special in the history of rock music. So what I thought I'd do with these top 5 videos is talk about, each week, top 5 albums, my personal favourites. They may or may not be the same as yours. Let me know in the comments. My favourite albums from each particular genre of rock that pretty much emerged in the 70s. And today we are looking at what I think are 5 of the finest blues rock albums from the 1970s, starting with
At the Fillmore East by the Allman Brothers Band.
Yeah, the first of 2 live albums on this list. I mean, if you are watching this video, then you probably have an interest in blues and blues-based rock, so you're going to know about this album. Well, we can say pretty much the same about all the albums on here, but it's just a masterpiece of an album, isn't it? I know there is apparently, footage of this. Apparently there's a DVD. I've never seen it, and it's almost like I don't really want to, because I've listened to this album so many times, and I've got the concert playing, I've got the DVD playing up here, and I don't want to watch the actual footage of it in case it's not as good as the version I've got in my head. But, just Stormy Monday, Statesboro Blues, In Memory of Elizabeth Reed, Hotlanta, and just all of the tracks on this album. It's just an album that, like, it's one of those albums where you might sit down to listen to one track, and you find that you've lost an hour or so because you just couldn't tear yourself away from it, and you've listened to the whole thing. Fantastic blues rock album, possibly the quintessential blues rock live album, I think, although there's another candidate for that title on the list. But yeah, Live at the Fillmore, or At Fillmore East by the Allman Brothers Band, that's definitely got to be on the list. Next,
Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs by Derek and the Dominos.
Yeah, not only one of the finest blues rock albums of the 70s, but one of the finest blues rock albums of all time. In fact, one of the finest albums of all time. Only one slightly weak song on this album, Thorn Tree in the Garden. That always just never, I never quite got that song, but everything else, absolutely searing version of Key to the Highway, which I did a cover of on this channel a little while back. Pretty much the tune that got me into blues in a big way. But, you know, Have You Ever Loved a Woman, Any Day, what else is on there? Bell Bottom Blues. Just the whole album is just a masterpiece. You know, Eric and Dwayne Allman. You know, again, Dwayne Allman. We've just been talking about the Allman Brothers, haven't we? You know, absolutely kind of driving each other on. You get the feeling. I speak about this a lot. You know, those albums where you can almost feel the eye contact between the musicians in the room. Nobody was phoning it in. Nobody was just there going through the motions. Everybody was absolutely playing out of their skin, and it is just an utter masterpiece of an album. I will never ever tire of hearing it. It's one of my favourite albums of all time, as I've said, and certainly if we're talking about blues rock from the 70s, you've got to consider this album somewhere near the top of the list. Next,
Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, the Stones at their best in this period, I think. That whole sort of early 70s kind of period, it's when you think of the Rolling Stones sound, this is the sound that you have in your head. And again, there's a feel on this album. Again, it's like, again, that whole eye contact thing. It's over an hour long. You know, I think, was it a double album when it came out on vinyl? I got into this album round about the dawn of the CD age, in the late 80s, and I can't remember if it was a double album or not. I'm assuming it is because of the length of it. But, you know, just, I mean, so many great tracks on here, and there's a looseness to it. Do you know what I mean if I say it's loose, but it's tight? Let me explain. It's, you know, everybody's playing in a relaxed kind of funky way where everybody's maybe just kind of a little bit either behind or ahead of the beat, but it's all gelling perfectly and locking together and knitting together in a perfect way. You know, and you know, to me, it's just if I had to pick one Rolling Stones album, Sticky Fingers is good. You know, but I think it would have to be this one. Yeah, I mean, it's just the overall kind of ambiance of it is probably the thing that sells it for me. I love this album, and to me, it's the best Stones album. Yeah, I would go. I would say that. And if you're talking blues rock albums from the 70s, yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's got to be on the list. Next,
Irish Tour '74. By Rory Gallagher.
Yeah, the second live album on the list, Rory Gallagher's Irish Tour '74. Again, to my shame, I didn't really get into Rory Gallagher until fairly late. You know, it was he was a name that I was aware of, and you know, I'd listened to possibly the odd track, but it took him sadly leaving us in the 90s for me to really sort of go and investigate his music. And the two albums that I love listening to are the two live albums, this one and Stage Struck. Stage Struck would have been possibly would have nudged ahead of this. I think I prefer Stage Struck, but this is still a strong contender. Why didn't I choose Stage Struck? Because it's not from the 70s. It came out in 1980. So if I've got to choose a Rory Gallagher album, and I think if you're talking about 70s blues rock, you do have to choose a Rory Gallagher album, then this is the one that you have to go with, really, because it's just the verve and excitement of his playing across the whole album. You know, he's got that real. Well, he's Rory Gallagher, you know, and he plays. You know, he doesn't go play it by half measures, does he? The story that you know, the finish on it, that is Strat, you know, that famous Strat with all the kind of the finish worn off, you know, it had to be allowed to dry out because it was absolutely, it weighed about, you know, kind of several ounces more than it did at the start of the gig because of all the sweat that it had absorbed. You know, he put everything into his playing, and it really shines through on this album. So yeah, Irish Tour '74, fantastic album. As I say, I think I prefer Stage Struck, but that one's not from the 70s. Next,
Smoking by Humble Pie.
Again, another band that, well, they were part of the subject of a video that I did recently about bands that I've only very recently discovered. And Humble Pie, again, they were one of those bands where I knew the name and I knew maybe a couple of the sort of bigger hits possibly, but I'd never really sort of listened to them and, kind of and done due diligence really and kind of checked them out and kind of listening to a few albums. And for me, Smoking is the the album. You can tell there's little bits and pieces of banter between the lads in the band in either at the beginning or the end of a song, and you just get the feeling that they're not just musicians playing together, but there's a sense of camaraderie and possibly probably friendship there between them as well, and it really shows through. The warmth that they feel for each other is coming through in the music. And again, going back to that sort of observation I made about the Stones, tight but loose. Everything's got like a really sort of relaxed, laid back, funky groove to it. Even on the more up tempo numbers, you're still feeling that they're just kind of just motoring along in a way that's kind of comfortable and familiar to them, and their playing is reflecting that, but it's still all kind of knitting together and gelling together perfectly. And Steve Marriott's voice, I mean, come on, one of the greatest rock vocalists of all time. As I rapidly discovered, just power, range, and and he was, quite the lad, wasn't he, Mr. Marriott? But there you go. So those are my picks for the top 5 blues rock albums of the 1970s. I expect some of you will agree strongly with a lot of these and possibly disagree strongly with them as well. But that's what the comments section's for. Let me know what you think in the comments. And that is the video for today, folks. Hope you've found it relatively entertaining, so to speak. And if that's the case, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already done so. And why not drop me a like while you're at it? Don't forget the live stream every Friday, 5 p.m. UK time, where we drink beer and talk about music and guitars. What a great way to kick off the weekend. I'd love to see you there if you can make it, but for now, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.